You are tuned into Municipal Focus. My name is Kevin Tachi, and I'm here to chat with you about some of the things that are going on in the region. The idea of Municipal Focus, it's different than the crosstalk show that we have, as it gives us an opportunity to talk what's going on in a said community, whether it's strictly Hanson or strictly Whitman, talk a little bit about things on different levels of government, whether it's like a municipality, maybe on the county level, or even the state level. Joining us today, we're privileged to be speaking with the chairperson for the Hanson Select Board, Laura FitzGerald-Kemmett is joining us. Laura, welcome to the show again.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I appreciate you having me.
So it's been a while since we've had a chance to talk. I want to say maybe just prior to town meeting and the town election. How are things in the town? What is the state of affairs in Hanson for those who may not be paying attention on a regular basis to a meeting?
Well, I suppose the state of affairs depends on the person describing them, but but I can only give you my perspective. I'd say that in terms of the board, we've got a great board. Everybody's engaged. Everybody's willing to do the work. We have somebody new who joined us this year. Mr. Hickey left and didn't run for re-election, and David George was elected in his place. So it's a steep learning curve. There's an awful lot to know. But David's digging in, and I think in time he'll be extremely well versed in what he needs to know. So yeah, we're doing great. We're getting business done without any infighting or saber rattling or any of that stuff. So things are going well there.
I think I would ask you, were you not up this time around?
I got reelected. Yep. Yeah.
What's that? Talk to me about that, because you know what? Even if you are an incumbent, you never know. You don't, it's tough sometimes to tell what the temperature is of the resident, of the taxpayer, until your 3 years is up and it's time for you to ask, I would like to serve for another 3 years.
Yeah, that's so true. In a way, no matter how much you try to connect with people and be open to feedback and communication, and I am, and certainly people do take advantage of that and call, and I welcome that, or email or whatever, plane, train, automobile. I think you at some point you're like, have I done enough? Are people happy with the job that I've done? Are they unhappy and I'm just not hearing about it? And certainly I don't base my conclusion on Facebook, because if I did, I'd probably just drive into a tree sometimes. But I'm happy to say I was reelected. What was and I was happy about that. I was so despondent about the attendance at our election. It was really, really low, and that's a bit demoralizing for people that are spending a lot of time trying to do things. It was a rainy day. I think it was, there were probably a lot of things. We didn't have any, hot button issue on the warrant. So I think, on the ballot, nobody was like, oh, I want this or I don't want that. So I think that's what led to it. There were very few contested races other than select board. And there were three people running for 2 seats. So.
What would you say, how has your vision changed from 3 years? As you're looking forward to the next 3 years, what do you feel are some of the things that residents want to see the board in its current incarnation tackle? And what are they saying to you as you see them on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think back, the things that I wanted to accomplish, of course, we did have COVID get in the way, and we've had turnover in town administrators and in town planners. And you don't realize until you're in that role how much of an impact that has on your ability to get traction on projects. Things move at a glacial pace anyway in town government, no matter how much you try to hurry them up. And that was extremely frustrating in my first term. And then COVID, kind of threw us for a loop. It's a lot of the same things. Main Street, Maquan, light control. We've got to move the needle on these things. We need to attract new businesses and find new sources of revenue. These things don't change. Some of the folks may change, some of the players may change, but these things don't change. So I am absolutely focused on effectuating change in those areas. That's what I originally ran for. I want to continue to move the needle on those. And that's still what I hear from people. So.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, we return for more Monday Night Talk here on 95.9 WATD. And joining us for this segment, we haven't had, it's been probably been a few months since we had the chairperson for the Hanson Board of Selectmen, or Select Board. We have Laura FitzGerald-Kemmett joining us. Madam Chairperson, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
So it's been, I think the last time we talked, it might have been prior to the town election in May. The thought is you and I had discussed trying to stay in touch on a regular basis and talk about what's going on in the great community of Hanson. How are things on your end as far as the town goes?
Well, I think things are going pretty well. Of course, there's always concerns. We won't call them problems, but concerns and matters that need to be addressed. But I think we've got a very good board. With this last election, I was reelected, and we had a new member join us, David George, and he is a retired state police officer. He's really engaged, very, very, very involved with the American Legion in town, and in general, and interesting and good guy. So he's come in ready to do the job, and then he's joining Ann Rain, who joined us last year, and Ed Hill, who joined us last year, and then Joe Weeks, who's been on for a bit.
So the last time you and I talked, I know town meeting had come and gone. I know one of the things that's usually a topic of conversation is how can the town improve when it comes to building, when it comes to some of the land around town. And we were talking off mic for a few moments before joining the show. And one of the things that you had apprised me to is that the Maquan School is in the process of being raised at this particular time. What's the latest? Once that has been torn down, is there a conversation as to what should happen to that property?
That's absolutely the conversation, and we're inviting everybody to join us in that conversation. So that piece of property is such a critical location. It's right next to our library and senior center, and it's right next to the Indian Head School, right? So that's a really critical piece of property. None of the boards that have been dealing with the use of that Maquan property have ever wanted to sell that property because of the proximity to those very important services and buildings. And never again will we ever have an opportunity to have a piece of property that is nearly all uplands, that is in close proximity to the senior center, library, and the school. And for town planning purposes, it really wouldn't be prudent for us to even entertain selling it. So one of the things that we're looking at, we've of course had many groups come to us and say, we've got needs. One of them is the library. They've had a study done that's showing that they're significantly undersized. And you can see that they're excellent people. They do an excellent job with the space that they have, as do the senior center folks, Mary Collins and Karen Stolfer in the library. They make it look seamless, and they do a great job with the limited space. But our seniors deserve better, and the town deserves better in terms of a space for the library. So those are some folks that might be doing something with that space. And also, we've had a lot of the sports groups express some interest in potentially having fields there. So we've got a Maquan property reuse committee. We didn't want to create another committee, but there's really no other way of getting, solving this riddle without that. And we are entertaining applications. We would love people to go on to our website under volunteer opportunities and apply to be part of that solution. If you've got ideas, we'd love to hear them. And not necessarily on Facebook, because that doesn't really effectuate any change, but being in person on that committee, you can effectuate some change and help shape what we do with that property.
I have to admit that this is a little bit of deja vu, because I believe the community, the town, had to do this recently in the recent history with the county hospital. Am I correct?
Correct. That is correct. The thing with these pieces of property, Kevin, is, the town will decide to hold on to it, but we want to make sure there's such unique opportunities when they come up that you want to make sure, are we going to be able to service as many people in town as possible with this piece of property? We don't want to just cater to one group or another, or whatever, small group constituency. We really have to think about the future. So I think the tact that the board has historically taken with that property and other properties is the same tact we're going to take with Maquan, which is, get that committee together, get the committee to make a presentation to the select board, get it before the voters. At the end of the day, right, we're always going to have the voters deciding ultimately on what's done with these pieces of property.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Main Street. I know that whenever there are political forums or when folks are running for office, one of the things that brought up, one of the topics brought up is Main Street. A lot of activity on Main Street, a new development. I think that right now it's in the middle of being repaved. Can we talk a little bit let's talk about that part of town.
We've got all kinds of stuff going on Main Street, some of which is driven by private individuals and some of which has been driven by our town planner. So we've got the Steve Egan property, that's the former Whole Scoop, beautiful Victorian. People were very upset about that building being torn down, and I understand, because that building was a beauty, and I admired it as well. Unfortunately, I think Mr. Egan found that it was just going to be cost prohibitive to even try to reuse that. And that typically is the case a lot of times with older buildings when you're getting into construction. So he did offer to people to come and take things if they wanted to from the building, if the Historic Commission wanted to or what have you. But that's going to be mixed commercial and residential. And we're thrilled to have it there. I think that it starts a domino effect along that Main Street. You're also seeing the former liquor store is going to be 4 condos, which Mr. Rosen is going to be working on. So I think that's going to be some very positive movement. You've also seen the dilapidated fire garage that we had there was taken down. So again, forward movement there. There do remain some buildings that are going to need to be addressed, and we are very focused on enforcement on those buildings to make sure that people are doing what they need to do, so that the people that are tenants in those buildings are safe, and so that our first responders are safe when they arrive if there's ever an issue. We're also seeing the gentleman who owns Spiro's. He has built a little convenience store next door, and that building has been at various things over the years, but nothing's really stuck. So it's going to be great to see that. I think he's going to have a good business model there with some of the other buildings that are going up with condos and what have you. He'll have a lot of foot traffic and folks from the T. So we've got that going on. And then we've had our town planner working on a series of grants for some sidewalks, some lighting, a boardwalk to connect us to Burridge. So we've got a lot of those irons are in the fire. We haven't heard yet whether we've gotten the grant money for any of those. And then Jameson Shaw, our highway director, worked with the state, and the state is coming in at no additional cost to the town of Hanson and using millings along the road there. So although it's a little bit of a pain in the neck in the short term, in the long term, I think we will find ourselves not cringing as much as we perhaps used to driving through that section of town.
Again, if you are just tuning in, we are speaking with the chairperson for the Hanson Select Board. Laura FitzGerald-Kemmett is our guest, and we are doing state of affairs with the great town of Hanson, Massachusetts, kind of staying on development and properties. A piece of property that was donated to the town deciding to take it, the light control property. What's the latest with that? My understanding was that that would eventually become a new highway department barn or property. Is that still the case, or has that changed?
Yeah, it's still I'd say the ball is somewhat in motion, but on the way to landing on that. Our highway folks need a new building. We know that. I literally haven't heard anybody dispute that fact. And if anybody does want to dispute it, I would urge you to call Jameson Shaw and visit the building, and any misconceptions you might have would be dispelled. So we know that they need to be put into safe conditions and conditions that we would all want to work in. Light control was donated by Light Control / Hubble, who ended up becoming their parent company, quite a few years back. And initially, the thought process, although we never voted to make it a highway building, the thought process was perhaps because of the size of the buildings and the type of buildings, they're buildings that are very similar to what our highway guys are in now. Perhaps that would be a good location. There was a highway building committee formed, because we don't do anything without a committee. You know, Kevin, you know that. So we had a committee. The last price tag I heard was that it was going to be $7 to $8.5 million, on which seemed like a very large dollar amount, and certainly more than we, I think, had been led to believe, or most of us had thought it would be, based on the early discussions of accepting that gift. And since that time, our town planner has come back and said, I need to be honest with you, as a planner, it's a little bit nuts to think about putting a highway building department on the very far side of the town. You're going to use all kinds of additional monies with salt and snow removal and the trucks, et cetera, if you're not centrally located. And he said, you know, just as a fundamental matter, as a planning matter, most highway buildings are centrally located. With that, and then also a letter from Mass Wildlife Fisheries telling us that they had serious concerns about a salt shed being located near the Burridge Wildlife Management Area. It seemed like we sort of had, you know, kind of all of these compelling reasons why perhaps we needed to revisit whether that should, the highway building should be located there. The highway committee is going to make a presentation, but Anne Rain is chairing that, and she's already sort of told the board, look, we don't think that this is a good location for it. So she'll make the presentation, and then the board will decide. And then if we don't locate it there, we have to figure out, what are we going to do with these buildings that have been gifted to us? We need to make use of them. There are some stipulations on those deeds that say you can't have a garden, you can't have a school, you can't, there's various things, because it was the source of a DEP, you know, oversaw a cleanup done by Hubble. As you can imagine, years and years and years of manufacturing. The ground was not untainted, but they were good stewards and did what they needed to do to clean up at least pieces of the property. We've got some questions about what remains on the property, to what extent the cleanup was done. And so we've applied for a grant to get somebody to come in and help us maneuver through those waters so we can figure out how to put that property to use. So that's what's going on with that.
I would ask you, let's talk a little bit about business. How is, knowing that we're maybe about a year and a half removed from COVID, have the businesses in Hanson been able to bounce back, or have you lost an amount of business that you're hoping that one day you'll be able to replace what you've lost during the 2.5, 3 years?
I would say the majority of our business, as you know, we're like 99% residential, right? So that 1% that we've had as businesses, the Walker Clays and Sullivan and Presidential Titanium, they're still hanging in and they're still doing well. It's hard to measure how some of those home businesses may or may not have done, because we don't really have any insight into that. But I'd say for the most part, the brick and mortar businesses have done pretty well. We've had some new businesses join us. We've had other businesses expand. So, I'd say it's fairly healthy. The Economic Development Committee is really working on trying to engage local businesses. So a letter is being sent out in the next week or so saying, hey, we have an economic development committee and we want to help you. And if you're thinking of expanding your business, talk to us, because we may have an ability to defer taxes for you so that you can afford to invest more in the build out. We may have other resources for you, so reach out to us. So we're very interested in that. We've got a good committee that's working on that.
Probably one of the final things I will ask you about, and that is it seems as though a lot of the important town departments in and around the South Shore, we're seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard, whether it's
Sure.
a new police chief or a new fire chief. I believe that a new fire chief has been sworn in the town of Hanson.
That is correct, Kevin. We're so fortunate. We've got a lot of great people that have come up through the ranks in both fire and police, and we were really fortunate that our former fire chief Jerry Thompson really groomed and helped prepare us for his departure by having our deputy chief, and so we've now got Robbie O'Brien. And when Jerry was a hometown son, and Robbie is as well, and both have had their families here and lived here, and Robbie is just extremely enthusiastic about this job. We're thrilled to have him. The department's thrilled to have him. As a result of his promotion, a couple of other folks in the department were able to get promoted. He's very interested in engaging people in areas that they're interested in. So there's a gentleman who's really into kind of IT and social media. So he's sort of the firefighters' IT and social media person. He's found ways to really connect with people. He's an advocate for his staff. I'm really looking forward to what he can do. He's already hitting it out of the ballpark just in the first couple of months.
Finally, let's talk a little bit about grant funding. I know it's something that these days budgets are tight. It's tough to be able to purchase certain things. Where the state of trying to secure grants for improvements, for department improvements, or in the town. Where are things at when it comes to Hanson and being able to get grants?
Well, we're super lucky. We've got Lisa Green, who is our town administrator. She's very adept at grants and getting grants. I have to say our department heads are very good at securing grants. We've got Jameson Shav, Robbie O'Brien has gotten an enormous amount prior to even becoming the chief. He's always on the lookout for how can we get grant money, to the point where I think we've only got one or possibly two of our vehicles that we've actually paid for with taxes. He's gotten that much grant money. He's gotten grant money for equipment. And I don't know that we call that out enough, that people realize how much money we're getting from the state and the federal government in some cases. So we've got Robbie, we've also got Mike Mix, our chief of police, who's done an excellent job, along with Mike Casey, of getting grant money. And I'm sure in the library and senior center, everybody understands, look, we've got to do the most we can with what we've got. So that might mean we've got to get other sources of funds. Our town planner, Tony DeFrias, has done an excellent job of working with the state's one-stop grant program. And we've currently got 5 grants out there. We won't find out until the end of the year whether or not we're going to get them. They are primarily focused on economic development. So we've got that. But Lisa Green has gotten us grants for things like redoing our HR policies and procedures. Now that might sound like something that's, like, oh, that's not extremely exciting. It's very important. We've gotten grant money to do programming, system programming, to add security cameras. The list goes on and on. So we're very fortunate, to have a good team of department heads and along with Lisa Green, really leading that charge.
So as we wrap up, is there anything we haven't touched upon, but you want to at least take a moment to tell our viewers some further information that maybe they may not know, or at least just to remind them?
Well, I mean, I would say whether you live in Hanson or you don't live in Hanson, we have some wonderful conservation properties. Barge Pond Wildlife Management Area is my personal favorite, and it's enormous, over 1,600 acres. Former cranberry bogs that are being brought back to their state before they were cranberry bogs. A diversity of flora and fauna, not to be compared to anywhere really around. There are people from all over the state that come there, but I sometimes find that people in Hanson and even just the surrounding towns, don't come there. So I would urge you to come there. And then also I would urge you to visit Smitty's Bog, which is up next to Camp Kiwanee. So we've got a whole bunch of other properties. And if you look on the conservation page on our town website, you'll see all of the properties, but it's all happening in Hanson, Kevin. If you want to commune with nature, Hanson is the place to do it.
Yeah, or even if you want to go for a dip, I believe Cranberry Cove is open, is it not?
Correct. Cranberry Cove is open up at Camp Kiwanee, and we've, in no small part, due to the wonderful Camp Kiwanee Commission, led by Frank Melissi, who has done a wonderful cleanup job there. Plantings. We got rid of the hornets that were in the sand torturing everybody last year. So I'm happy to report they're not back. And then we've got. It just the facility is beautiful. It really, everybody that I've ever brought there from out of town is mesmerized by the building, by the cove itself. It's really something unique to Hanson. And whether you are a resident or a non-resident, you are able to go and swim there. And again, the information is on our website under Camp Kiwanee.
Well, I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to better inform the residents of Hanson and doing it through Whitman Hanson Community Access.
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. Take care.
You got it. And again, you are tuned into Municipal Focus as we do our best to keep you informed and up to date on things that are happening in and around the area through this show. Until our next program, stay tuned and have a great day.